20, 30 years maybe.
Surely not.
And next to Hugo Charlton, who's a barrister and solicitor, who just gave a talk earlier on international human rights and law. We have Chris Busby, Dr. Chris Busby, who just spoke on Fukushima earlier on today, and I think opened a lot of people's mind as to what is actually going on in Fukushima, fascinating stuff. And we have Dita, whose surname I have great difficulties with, excuse me, Dita Rituma from Latvia, who's been doing talks and interjections on new ideology. So, and we have standing by in the as panelists is Dr. Ian Hossack somewhere, possibly even Richard Lawson, Jerry Ryan, who did a talk yesterday, may be persuaded, but we'll come by. So, we're going to start the wheel off.
What's he doing?
This rather messy bit down here says nukes, and whenever the arrow lands on, I'll ask you, the audience, to ask a question based upon that subject. You can obviously twist it around a bit to suit your pet subject, but it may come round, and don't make it too obvious or we'll all spot it. Okay, so, starting off, the first question on the subject of Afghanistan. A big question, more than just a geography question. Okay, the lady at the front. A question on Afghanistan for our panel, please.
Well, the first thing that strikes my mind, is it true it's all about opium poppies? Switch on first. No, it's almost.
Go on, shout.
Shout, is it true that it's all about opium poppies?
The question was, is the war in Afghanistan all about opium poppies? So let's see, opium, heroin, an illegal drug, possibly
morphine, painkillers, is it about?
many things, a large amount of untraceable, unregulated money associated with it. Is the war in Afghanistan based upon opium? Hugo, would you like to kick it off as a experienced drug salesperson in many foreign areas? Whiskey, I should add, whiskey in foreign areas. Any thoughts on opium in Afghanistan?
Hello. Is this working?
Yes.
No, it's not to do with. No, it's not to do with opium. Opium's been coming out of Afghanistan quite a long time, quite happily. But it does keep the war going. I think, having been in Afghanistan once a long time ago, travelling through as a hippie, it's a shame what's happening now, but no, it's not to do with opium, in my opinion.
This is question time! Okay, so a negatory from Hugo Charlton on opium in Afghanistan.
Okay, well, I understand myself it's about two things. Although opium is certainly part of it, I don't think it's a major part. One part is the control of areas enabling them to put pipelines for oil from the oil fields of Azerbaijan and southern Russia, or what used to be the southern Soviet Union, to drive pipelines through to Europe. So, and the control of that area is very much a case of who controls Afghanistan, controls that area, because the sort of people who were in control of Afghanistan would be very concerned about blowing up these pipelines if they were built. So they would be rather like the Iraqi oil pipelines, they would be destroyed all the time. So they have to have control of that area in order to have a reasonable access to the oil fields of these ex-Southern Soviet Union territories.
No, I don't agree with that.
Alright, we have disagreement. Dita.
Yeah, I sort of am from Latvia, and during my life, Latvia has been engaging in Afghanistan war both in Russian times and the European Union times. Our soldiers have been going there, but I have met also.
I'm going to have to answer 2-minute replies. 2-minute replies, questions.
Afghanistan people, and they say there were no opium in their country before these wars started. They say there were no opium, and apparently these wars brought in this big opium market. But I want to remind you that that was an independent nation, and this English sort of cozy colonizing attitude, oh, we need this, we need that, think about it once again, guys.
Okay, thank you. And Penny, do we have a timekeeper, someone who can, has got 2 minutes on their watch, a vibes monitor? We need to keep these verbose panellists down to 2 minutes, and when it hits 2 minutes, if somebody who's got the watch could just start a little gentle clap to encourage speed and brevity. Penny Kemp.
Well, I don't actually know the answer to that, but one thing I'm absolutely sure about, it's not about democracy. All the evidence shows that the Americans and the British are not that interested in democracy in these regions, or else they would have taken action in other places as well. I tend to agree with Chris that it's more about oil and oil lines and keeping our supply going.
Well, let's come back with a more intelligent question now, because I was the first.
Go on, Hugo gets a quick interjection to make up
if
this.
the question is it an extension of the Great Game, that thing whereby China, Russia and the West were fighting for control? No, I don't think it is part of the Great Game, and I'm not sure about oil pipelines either, because the region is so unstable, and I'm going to say quite what they are doing now, I think nobody really knows, except to try and control a rogue state, and they're failing.
Well, I'd just like to tell you all that when I was young, up to the age of 3, I lived in southern Afghanistan, and some Pathan at the transfer of power in India tried to buy me for 50 rupees, but my father said he wouldn't sell me.
It is worth noting that...
I need to tell you that we didn't have drugs in Latvia before we got this time now. We were drug free, but after they started war in Afghanistan all times, we're floating in drugs in Latvia now. Young people are just very, very badly taken.
Okay. It is worth noting probably that one of the reasons that the Americans and the ISI, the Pakistani intelligence services, supported the Taliban in the run-up was exactly for that reason of chaos that Chris and Hugo mentioned, that both those organisations, both those states wanted a one single controlled Afghanistan. They didn't want the sort of warlords, mujahideen, separate, basically independent practically regions. They wanted one government that could control the whole country. Pakistan wanted that from a trade point of view. UNICAL wanted that from an oil pipeline point of view. And obviously 9/11 was the ostensible reason for America turning against the Taliban, but possibly the real reason was that the meetings that George Bush had with the Taliban at his Crawford Ranch about oil pipelines just didn't bear fruit. The Americans and the UNICAL in particular weren't going to get what they want, so the relationship soured. Anyway, so, moving on. The next question, please. We're going to have one more round of questions, and I'm going to ask you, the audience, to vote off half the panel, and we'll get new contestants on. Here we go. Ooh, it looks like climate change by a millimetre. Big subject, possibly one of the largest subjects that this generation is going to face. Richard Lawson, a question on climate change, please.
Okay, does the team think that we should actually take the fight to the climate skeptics? What I mean by this is that what's been happening up to now is that they've been hammering away at the climate science and criticising it in every single detail. It's like fighting a hydra, because every time you cut off one misconception you get another two growing in its place. And we've been on the defensive, or the scientists have been on the defensive. And I think it's time we went on to the attack. Because in science, you put forward a hypothesis and then you try to disprove that hypothesis. And the hypothesis of the skeptics, or the denialists, is that there is no such thing as that CO2 has a very, very low effect on the climate. Vast amounts of the science backs that it has a big effect. And they have 1 or 2 papers arguing that it's a small effect. And I think we should, well, does the team think that we should change from the defensive to the attack on the climate scientists? Thank you.
Okay, have we got Lord Monckton and others in our... No, I shouldn't say side, should I? In our side. Shall we start off with Penny? Penny Cannon. In fact, maybe you use that. Which is the...
Does this one work? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Actually, in answer to your question, Richard, yes. I mean, I can remember I've been working on climate change now for many, many years. And I can remember in 1989, when I was involved in Europe, actually seeing a report done by the European Parliament, which was actually suppressed, actually telling us, this is 1989, remember this, it's really important to remember that it's 1989, and we're now 2011, and the media is now coming out with all the things that was said then. That report was suppressed by vested interests, and I think there really is a problem, because what we need is a full-scale change of our economic system. At the moment, climate change and climate change skeptics work very happily by fear, actually putting fear into people's minds by saying that everything's got to change, the economic system will have to change, and the way we all live will have to change, etc., etc. Well, my point is that even if we want this, if climate skeptics wanted to carry on like it is, what is the point of us all living in a planet where human life will actually be extinct in the long run? If you actually read all the stuff that climate change people are saying, our life on this planet will be extinct in the long run. Now, I don't believe as a Green I'm here to save the planet. The planet will save itself quite happily, probably very happily without humans on it. What I'm here to do is try and ensure that humans can live in harmony with the planet. And I've just had a grandson, and and it's made me even more determined, because I look at my grandson and I think, what legacy are we leaving to him? And it's absolutely the responsibility of all of us, each one of us, to do whatever we can to ensure that the issue of climate change is at the top of the political agenda.
Thank you. Hugo, is that your submission to the electorate before being voted on?
Sorry.
I agree with Penny. No, I've got something to say in a minute.
Can you hold this
Oh,
please
okay,
before the toilet?
Right.
Why are you passing it to me?
Well, can I...
Give him time to think, isn't it? You're on the spot. Here we go, Hughes.
Well, the only concern I have about anthropomorphic climate change is that if it isn't true, why would it be put about? Who benefits? And the only people who do benefit are the nuclear industry. But they are so... It is conceivable that they are behind the promotion of climate change for anthropomorphic reasons. But, not the old, well, possibly, but the point about the skeptics is the number of arguments they have put up, which actually only amount to about 6 real ones, are so inadequate. If that's the best they can do, someone like me who's not a scientist has to think it is likely that, I think it is now agreed that the climate is warming, although Lawson doesn't agree, it may agree, but whether it's a result of man-made change, I think is almost inevitably the case. But the people who benefit are the nuclear industry.
Thank you.
This is essentially a question about science, as I see it, the way in which Richard has couched it. And unfortunately, it does look as if what he's saying is that we should believe the science in the maximum number of scientific papers as opposed to the science in the minimum number. Well, if that's not what he's saying, then he's correct, because actually science works in such a way that one single study is capable of destroying an entire galaxy of studies that show something else. So The way in science is not like a court of law where you bring in evidence and the evidence is kind of weighed in two pans, and whichever weighs the heaviest carries the day. The way science works is by the falsification of current models. So you have a scientific model, and it might be backed up by 200,000 papers, all agreeing with each other that this scientific model is correct. But if somebody comes along and says, excuse me, but there's a piece of evidence here which doesn't quite fit into the model, that single paper is sufficient to overturn the hundreds of papers that say the model is correct. So as far as the model is concerned, we have to, as far as science is concerned, that's how science works. That is the scientific method. Now, as far as global warming is concerned, I am not sure, to be honest. There's no doubt that global warming exists. We cannot argue about that. We see so much evidence of it all over the place. So we're not saying that there's no global warming. But what we are saying, or what I am wondering about, is whether or not it's caused by CO2. Now, I was trained as a spectroscopist. I know about CO2. I know about the absorption of radiation, of infrared radiation by carbon dioxide, and I have to say that water vapor absorbs a lot more infrared radiation than carbon dioxide. There's a lot more water vapor in the atmosphere. And the other problem I have with the anthropomorphic global warming scenario is this, that laser reflection studies on the planet Mars show that the planet Mars is also heating up. Now, the planet Mars certainly isn't suffering from anthropomorphic global warming. So there does seem to be some variation in solar activity that's causing an increase in the temperature of this planet and the planet Mars. Now, that doesn't mean to say that carbon dioxide on this planet produced by fossil fuel usage is not also a component. So, as far as I'm concerned, it would be a very good thing as if we were to act as if the carbon dioxide production was a serious matter and to do something about it. But that brings us into another question about the whole expansionist scenario, about the production, the usage of energy, and an article which I ask you to suggest you look at, which is an article I wrote about George Monbiot in Counterpunch on the internet. If you look at Counterpunch, you'll find this article. Because the question is, what is all the energy for? We're having nuclear power, we're having this power, that power, that power. Nobody ever asks what this energy is for. So I think as Greens, I'm including myself here, we have to say that we don't need all this energy. We're absolutely using energy in order to produce things which we don't actually need. We do all this work to make these things, and we work and work and work and make a load of stuff that we don't need, and we sell it to ourselves with more energy, and all this energy is a complete waste of time. So frankly, I'm with the global warming people insofar as it's some project to reduce the amount of energy that we use. But as far as the science is concerned, I'm uncertain.
Global warming consists of various theories, what is caused of. And I agree with all the previous talkers. What I can contribute further is that we can put in the aspect of global warming tax being used to create New World Order government. There are such theories, and I don't know if they're true, but there is a theory, and we should put it into the picture and have an open mind. And then there is another aspect of that there is HAARP. I don't know how many people know what HAARP is. It's H-A-A-A-R-P. It's an instrument that warms up ionosphere, higher ionosphere. And there are, of course, very dangerous effects of that, and it can become apocalyptic and warm up enormous amounts of our atmosphere and even do holes up to the cosmic levels. And that, of course, causes warming too. And that is some kind of private business almost. Pentagon has something to do it, but it mostly as Federal Reserve in the United States. Also that HAARP that is in Alaska is also quite unknown creature, and we should get more to know about it and to get to control it, because it can disturb the whole air layer and the weather patterns anywhere on the globe.
Okay, good. So, we are... Penny wants to very quickly come back in on something. I'm not just quite allowed because we're just about to vote. We've had 2 rounds of questions. Okay, very quickly we'll make a little of that.
Global warming was actually first discovered in 1886 by a Swedish chemist. You can actually chart, I don't know if anybody knows the work of Aubrey Mayer from the Global Commons Institute, who I've worked really closely with. You can actually chart the emissions. You can actually chart the
1 minute.
From the Industrial Revolution to now, and you can actually see a rise which goes up like this. For many, many years, the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere had little dips in it, but it was relatively stable. But since the Industrial Revolution, you can actually chart how it's increased. I think also, I'd just like to say to...
Oh, sorry, come on now, we're focusing on this. Hugo's already asking for anything.
Scientists at the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change agree that there is global warming, and the skeptics, if you really look closely at them, most of them have been financed by the oil industry.
So that seems to be fairly clear sort of reply that it probably is worth going after inspecting. Hugo's got 30 seconds, then we're going to vote. So then we're going to vote half this lot off. Hugo, 30 seconds.
I just want to be controversial for a minute.
Not a minute for 30 seconds.
Point that I think we're doomed. If the global scientists are right, and I hope they're not, and despite what I've just said, and despite what Chris has said, I think they probably are. The reality is with China that there's nothing much we do, and I think what we should be thinking about intellectually is survival mechanisms. I think we should move on and start, as well as talking about trying to preventative mechanisms, I think there's a movement, the environmental movement and the Green Party movement should start thinking about survivalism and what we do when the various catastrophes happen and how we strengthen local communities and bottom up ruling processes to deal with the catastrophe that will come.
Okay, thank you very much. So now, it is over to you, the audience. I want 4 claps for contestant number 1, contestant number 2, contestant number 3, contestant number 4. And obviously the 2 loudest claps stay on, and we say goodbye to the 2 quietest cases of clap. And then we get 2 more audiences on. So, starting from the top, for contestant number 1, can I hear a clap for contestant number 1? Okay, yeah, just retain that sound level. And for contestant number 2. Oh, definitely a clap in many places there. And for contestant number 3. And for contestant number 4. Well, 1 and 3 was my initial hearing on that, staying on. Does that vaguely concur with people's ear? 1 and 3 stay on? Thank you very much, Dieter. Thank you very much, Hugo. Do get your free cup of tea at the bar. So, we can welcome on Dr. Ian Hossack and Dr. Richard Lawson. My God, there are doctors in there.